A billionaire finds his maid's daughter secretly washing dishes at 2:30 a.m., and he's about to discover the sacrifice no child should ever make. 2:30 a.m. The great house on Ashford Hill was silent, except for the low hum of expensive appliances and the distant tick of an antique clock. Billionaire Vincent Harlow, walking his silent halls, finds an unexpected sight in his vast kitchen. Sophie Brennan, a 15-year-old girl, his housekeeper's daughter, is bent over the sink, scrubbing crystal glassware from his business dinner. Her hands move mechanically through towers of plates. Her blonde hair is pulled back in a hasty bun. Her shoulders are tight with exhaustion. She should be in bed preparing for school. Instead, she is here, working with the desperate efficiency of someone running out of time. The billionaire, a man who built a $2.3 billion real estate empire reading people and spotting patterns others missed, knows immediately. This is more than a girl helping her mother. It's a clue to a crisis he can't yet understand. Right now, somewhere in the world, there's a Sophie Brennan washing dishes at 2:30 a.m., a child sacrificing everything because the system failed their family. If this story matters to you, subscribe and comment what time it is where you're watching from. Every subscription pushes this to someone who needs it. Every comment could change a life. Or you could just keep scrolling. Your choice. Vincent Harlow had built his fortune on seeing what others couldn't. But sleep was a price his mind refused to pay. Tonight, the silence in his mansion felt different, heavier, like something waiting to break. That silence shattered. The soft clink of glass on marble. Not a dangerous sound. His security was absolute. No one could breach this property. But it was a secret sound, furtive and careful, coming from the ground floor. From the main kitchen, the quiet, rhythmic scraping of a sponge against porcelain. Vincent froze at the top of the grand staircase. He listened. His mind, the asset that made him billions, began calculating. Not a thief. A thief wouldn't be washing dishes. An employee. But why? At this hour? He moved down the hallway, his steps silent on Italian marble. He descended the staircase, hands sliding along the mahogany rail. The kitchen door was slightly ajar, a thin line of yellow light bleeding into the darkened corridor. He pushed it open. The kitchen was enormous, designed for catering 50-person events, a cavern of stainless steel, granite countertops, and professional-grade equipment. Under the single pendant light above the sink stood a girl, dwarfed by the industrial space around her. She was small, thin, hunched over the deep steel basin. She wore a simple black shirt and a yellow apron tied at her waist. She was scrubbing a crystal wine glass with focused, desperate energy, her movements too fast, too urgent. Vincent cleared his throat. "Sophie," he said quietly. The girl gasped, a sharp, strangled sound. She spun around so violently that the plate in her hand slipped. It fell. It shattered on the marble floor, crystal fragments scattering like ice. Her face went white. Her eyes, red-rimmed, shadowed with exhaustion so profound it looked like illness, went wide with a terror far too large for a broken plate. "Mr. Harlow, I'm so sorry. I'll pay for that. Her voice cracked high and panicked. Vincent saw her clearly now under the harsh kitchen lights. This was Sophie Brennan, his housekeeper Eleanor's daughter. He'd seen her once or twice over the years, quiet, polite, always reading in the staff quarters. But this girl looked nothing like those memories. Her blonde hair was falling out of its bun, strands plastered to her damp forehead. The skin beneath her eyes wasn't just tired. It was bruised, dark purple shadows that looked painted on. Her hands, still dripping with soapy water, were raw and red, the knuckles chapped. Her sneakers were worn through at the toes. She looked like she was drowning. "Where's your mother?" Vincent asked, stepping carefully around the broken ceramic. His voice was softer now, but his eyes were sharp, cataloging every detail. She had a migraine. I told her I'd finish up. It's no problem, really, The lies tumbled out quickly. Too quickly. Too practiced. Vincent crossed his arms, studying her with the same intensity he used to dismantle opponents in boardroom negotiations. "You're supposed to be at Riverside Prep. You're one of their scholarship students, aren't you? Top of your class, if I remember correctly." Sophie's jaw tightened. A flash of pride broke through the fear. I could do both. Can you? Vincent moved closer, his gaze drifting past her to the sink. It was piled high, dozens of plates, wine glasses, serving platters, copper pots. The remains of his 30-person business dinner. This was work for a full catering crew, not one exhausted teenager. He looked back at her. How many nights have you been doing this? Just a night. Mom's been under the weather. Sophie. His voice was sharp now, cutting. I didn't build my fortune by accepting convenient lies. Try again. Her face crumpled for just a second before she rebuilt the mask. But that second was enough. Vincent saw the truth beneath it. Not just exhaustion. Desperation. Terror. 6 weeks, she whispered, her eyes dropping to the floor. Maybe 7. I've been coming after my shift at the grocery store ends at midnight. I finish Mom's work here, then go home around 4. I sleep a few hours. School starts at 8. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Vincent felt something cold settle in his chest. Your shift at the grocery store? You're 15 years old. I have a work permit. It's legal. Sophie's chin came up defiantly, but her eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. And I'm almost 16, old enough to help my family. Vincent said nothing. His mind was racing, connecting pieces. A 15-year-old working 2 jobs through the night. A top scholarship student. A housekeeper who'd been taking frequent sick days. This wasn't a girl helping her mother with chores. This was something much worse. His eyes drifted to Sophie's backpack, slumped by the service entrance. It was worn, the fabric faded, the zippers straining. Hanging from the main zipper was a braided honor cord, blue and gold. Vincent knew that cord. Riverside Prep gave them to students in the top 10%. Honor student. Midnight shifts. Washing dishes at 2:30 a.m. The pattern was broken, and Vincent Harlow hated broken patterns. Leave the dishes, Vincent said, his voice quiet but absolute. Sophie froze, her hands still submerged in soapy water. Sir, leave them. Go home. Get some sleep. But my mom, she'll be so upset if they aren't done. She'll get in trouble. I will handle your mother, Vincent said. The tone left no room for argument. Go home, Claire. She hesitated. For a moment, Vincent thought she might argue. But then her shoulders slumped, not with relief, but with something closer to defeat, as if she'd failed a mission she couldn't afford to fail. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. She quickly peeled off the heavy yellow apron, grabbed her backpack, and slipped out the service door into the pre-dawn darkness. The door clicked shut behind her. Vincent stood alone in the massive kitchen. The silence rushed back in, but now it was different. Now it was filled with questions. He looked at the mountain of dishes. He looked at the spot where the honor cord had hung from her backpack. He thought about the terror in her eyes, the kind of terror that came not for being caught doing something wrong, but for being caught doing something necessary. A 15-year-old valedictorian working through the night wasn't helping her mother. She was saving her. But from what? Vincent walked to his study. He didn't try to sleep. He sat in his leather chair, watching the black sky slowly bleed to gray through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was a man who solved problems for a living, billion-dollar problems involving shipping routes, zoning laws, international contracts. But this problem was different. This problem was human. At 7 a.m., Vincent picked up his phone and dialed. It rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Dr. Patricia Wells, Riverside Preparatory Academy. Dr. Wells, this is Vincent Harlow. I'm calling about one of your students, Sophie Brennan. There was a pause. Mr. Harlow, may I ask why you're inquiring about Sophie? Because I found her washing dishes in my kitchen at 2:30 this morning, Vincent said bluntly. And she looked like she was dying. Another pause, longer this time. When Dr. Wells spoke again, her voice was heavy with something Vincent recognized. Guilt. Mr. Harlow, I've been meaning to reach out to Sophie's mother, but the situation is complicated. Then uncomplicate it for me, Vincent said. Tell me everything. The phone call with Dr. Patricia Wells lasted 11 minutes. By the end of it, Vincent Harlow felt a cold fury settle in his chest. Not at the headmaster, but at himself. Sophie Brennan was one of our brightest, Dr. Wells said, her voice tight with regret. Was. Past tense. That's the tragedy, Mr. Harlow. Vincent leaned back in his leather chair, watching the sunrise paint his study walls gold. Tell me, sophomore year, she ranked third in her class. She had a mind for mathematics that our teachers described as intuitive. She could see patterns in calculus that students 2 years older couldn't grasp. Dr. Wells paused. We awarded her a full merit scholarship. For years, all expenses covered. She was going to be something extraordinary. And now, Vincent's voice was quiet. Now she's failing. In the past 6 weeks, Sophie has missed 12 full days of school. She's fallen asleep in class 7 times, completely unconscious, head on a desk. Her math teacher found her crying in the hallway last week because she'd failed a quiz on material she'd already mastered. Vincent closed his eyes. He saw Sophie's face again, those bruised shadows beneath her eyes, the trembling hands. Her teachers are devastated, Dr. Wells continued. They've tried to reach out, but Sophie insists everything is fine, and her mother has missed every scheduled conference. When does the scholarship committee meet? Vincent asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. Next Wednesday. Dr. Wells's voice dropped. Mr. Harlow, I've fought for Sophie, but our board is strict. The scholarship has academic and attendance requirements. Sophie is violating both. If she doesn't turn this around immediately, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Vincent thanked her and ended the call. He sat motionless, staring at his phone. Then he pressed another number. Security. Dawson speaking. Michael, it's Vincent. I need a background check. Complete and discreet. He paused. Eleanor Brennan, one of my housekeepers. Employment history, financial situation, medical records if you can access them legally. Everything. Michael Dawson had worked for Vincent for 12 years. He knew when not to ask questions. How soon do you need this, sir? By noon. Consider it done. Vincent spent the next 4 hours attempting to work. Conference call with his Hong Kong development team at 9. Legal team presentation on a $340 million rezoning project at 10:30. He nodded at the right moments, signed the right documents. But his mind was in that kitchen, watching a 15-year-old girl scrub dishes with hands rubbed raw. Hearing her whisper, I'm almost 16, old enough to help my family. No child should have to say those words. At 11:47 a.m., Michael appeared at Vincent's study door carrying a thin manila folder, his expression heavy. Sir, you're not going to like this. Vincent gestured to the chair across from his desk. Show me. Michael opened the folder, spreading documents across the polished mahogany. Eleanor Brennan, age 42, employed here for 8 years. Performance reviews are excellent. Punctual, thorough, professional. Until 6 weeks ago. What happened 6 weeks ago? She started taking sick days. 14 absences in 6 weeks. That's more than she took in the previous 8 years combined. Vincent studied the dates. They aligned perfectly with Sophie's academic collapse. Medical records? Michael's jaw tightened. Eleanor Brennan was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer 11 weeks ago. She's undergoing aggressive chemotherapy at County General. The cold fury in Vincent's chest turned to ice. Go on. Monthly chemotherapy costs after insurance, $3,200. Michael pulled out another sheet. Her salary, $3,800 per month. Vincent stared at the numbers. The equation was brutally simple. Rent, utilities, food, medicine. Eleanor Brennan had $600 left each month for everything else. There's more, Michael said quietly. Eleanor is a widow. Her husband, Daniel Brennan, died 5 years ago in a construction accident. Workplace safety violation. Faulty scaffolding on a downtown high-rise. Life insurance? None. The family sued Castellano Construction. Case settled in 2020. Michael slid another document across the desk. Settlement amount, $45,000. Vincent's head snapped up. $45,000? For a wrongful death case. He'd seen settlements like that before. Lowball offers made to desperate people who couldn't afford a fight. Eleanor couldn't afford a good attorney. She used public legal aid. They were overwhelmed, understaffed. Castellano's legal team buried her in paperwork until she had no choice but to settle. Who represented Castellano? Vincent asked, though something dark was already forming in his gut. Michael met his eyes. Harlow and Associates. Vincent felt the air leave his lungs. Harlow and Associates, the law firm his father had built. The firm Vincent had inherited at 28 and sold 10 years ago for $200 million. He'd kept the name on the door as part of the sale agreement, a legacy, he'd thought. But he'd also trained those lawyers. He'd built that culture of aggressive, merciless litigation. Win at all costs. Destroy the opposition. He'd crushed Eleanor Brennan. Maybe not personally, but the machine he'd built had ground her into dust and left her with nothing. And now her 15-year-old daughter was working 2 jobs through the night, sacrificing her education, her health, her entire future, because Vincent Harlow's law firm had decided $45,000 was enough for a widow and child. One more thing, Michael said carefully. Sophie Brennan also works at Morrison's Grocery on 5th Street. Night shift, 6 days a week, 6 p.m. to midnight. Legal work permit. She's been employed there for 7 weeks. 7 weeks. Right after her mother's diagnosis. Vincent stood abruptly, walking to the window. Below, his manicured grounds stretched out like a green ocean. 50 acres of perfect lawns, sculpted gardens, a tennis court he never used. His property taxes alone were more than Eleanor Brennan's annual salary. He'd built all of this on the backs of people like her. People who worked quietly, desperately, invisibly, while he slept in silk sheets and complained about insomnia. Michael, Vincent said without turning around, I need you to pull the complete case file on Brennan versus Castellano Construction. Every document, every email, every deposition. I want to see exactly how he destroyed that woman's life. Sir, the firm was sold. I don't care. Get it? His voice was steel. And Michael? Not a word of this to anyone. Understood. Yes, sir. When Michael left, Vincent stood alone in his study, staring at the folder on his desk. Inside was the story of a family broken by tragedy and crushed by greed. A widow fighting cancer on $600 a month. A 15-year-old honor student washing dishes at 2:30 a.m. because the system, his system, had failed them. Some men built empires on innovation, others on real estate. Vincent Harlow had apparently built his on the wreckage of families like the Brennans. And now he had a choice. Walk away and let Sophie Brennan's future collapse, or do something that money and power were actually meant for. He picked up his phone and dialed a third number. Richardson Legal. How may I direct your call? James Richardson. Tell him it's Vincent Harlow, and I need the best attorney he has. Today. It was time to pay a debt he hadn't known he owed. Vincent didn't sleep that day. He couldn't. He spent the afternoon in his study, the folder from Michael spread before him. Eleanor Brennan's employment file, her medical bills, settlement documents from her husband's death. Each page formed a picture Vincent couldn't look away from. At 6 p.m., he watched from his window as Sophie's small Honda pulled into the service entrance. She climbed out wearing a bright red Morrison's Grocery vest, backpack slung over one shoulder. Even from this distance, she looked exhausted. She would work until midnight. Then she would come here. Vincent would be waiting. The house settled into evening rhythm. Day staff departed. By 10 p.m., the mansion was silent except for climate control humming and the antique clock ticking in the foyer. Vincent returned to his study and waited. At 2:17 a.m., he heard it. The soft click of the service entrance unlocking. Footsteps, quiet and careful, moving toward the kitchen. He gave her 10 minutes. Enough time to tie on her yellow apron and begin. Then he walked through the silent house, heart heavy with what he now knew. When he pushed open the kitchen door, the scene was exactly as before. Sophie stood at the sink, small frame bent over mountains of dishes from his dinner party. Her blonde hair falling from its ponytail. Movements mechanical, exhausted. But this time, Vincent saw something different. A 15-year-old carrying the weight of her mother's life on her shoulders. His law firm's failure. His own complicity. Sophie, he said quietly. She jumped, spinning around. A wine glass slipped from her hands, but she caught it, clutching it to her chest. Her eyes went wide, filling with tears. Mr. Harlow, I'm sorry. I know you told me not to come back, but Mom was so weak today after treatment, and I couldn't let her. The words tumbled out in a panicked rush. "Stop," Vincent said gently but firmly. Sophie's mouth snapped shut. A tear slipped down her cheek. Vincent stepped fully into the kitchen. "I know about your mother's cancer." Sophie's face went white. The glass trembled in her hands. "I know about the chemotherapy costs. Your father's death. The settlement." He paused. "I know about Morrison's. I know you're working 6 days a week until midnight, then coming here to finish your mother's shifts, then sleeping 3 hours before school. How did you? You had no right." "I had every right," Vincent said without anger. "You're a child working yourself to death in my house. That gives me every right to ask why." Sophie's jaw tightened. That flash of defiance sparked in her exhausted eyes. "I'm not a child. I'm 15, almost 16. I can work. It's legal. Legal doesn't mean right." Vincent crossed his arms. "Riverside Prep called me yesterday. Your scholarship committee meets next Wednesday. They're voting on revoking your funding." The defiance crumbled. Sophie's face went pale. "No. You've missed 12 days in 6 weeks. Fallen asleep in class 7 times. Failed a quiz on material you'd already mastered. I can catch up," Sophie whispered without conviction. "I just need to work harder. I could do both." "You can't." Vincent's voice was sharp, cutting through her protests. "Look at yourself. What did you last sleep a full night? Eat a real meal? You're destroying yourself. I don't have a choice." The words exploded from her, raw and desperate. The glass slipped from her hands, shattering on marble. Neither moved. "Don't you understand? If I stop working, we can't pay for Mom's treatment. If we can't pay, she dies. So I don't care about school or sleep or anything else. Nothing else matters." Her voice cracked on the last word. She stood there, tears streaming, her small frame shaking with sobs held back for weeks. Vincent felt something break inside his chest. He stepped forward, avoiding the broken glass, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than it had been in years. "It was my law firm," he said. Sophie looked up, confused, her face wet with tears. "The firm that represented Castellano Construction in your father's case. That buried your mother in paperwork and forced her to accept a settlement barely enough to cover his funeral." Vincent's throat tightened. "Harlow and Associates. I built that firm. I trained those lawyers. I created the culture that crushed your family." Sophie stared at him, trying to process through exhaustion and grief. "The debt your family is carrying, the reason you're standing in this kitchen at 2:30 in the morning instead of sleeping, that's on me." Vincent's eyes stung with tears he hadn't allowed himself in 20 years. "That debt is mine, Sophie, and I'm going to pay it." "I don't understand," Sophie whispered. Vincent took a breath, steadying himself. When he spoke again, his voice carried absolute certainty of a decision that could not be unmade. "Your mother's medical bills are now my responsibility. All of them. Every treatment, every medication, every doctor's visit." Sophie's eyes went wide. "You can't." "I can and I will. Your mother's position comes with comprehensive benefits I should have offered years ago. Full health coverage, unlimited sick leave. She'll never choose between her health and her job again." "Mr. Harlow, I'm not finished." Vincent's voice was firm. "You're going back to school tomorrow. You're never washing another dish in this house. You're quitting Morrison's. And that scholarship you're about to lose? I'm calling Dr. Wells tonight. Consider it restored." Sophie couldn't speak. She stood there, tears streaming, whole body trembling. "What?" Barely a whisper. Vincent looked at the broken girl in the yellow apron and saw what he'd been trying to bury for 30 years. His sister Julia at 16, dying because their father decided experimental treatment was too expensive. Himself at 22, powerless to save her. "Because some debts can't be paid," he said softly. "They can only be passed forward. And you, Sophie Brennan, are going to change the world someday. But not like this. Never like this." Sophie's legs gave out. She sank into a chair, hands covering her face as sobs racked her body. Not tears of sadness anymore. Relief so profound it was almost painful. Vincent stood there watching her cry, making a silent promise to the sister he'd lost and the girl he'd found. No more children would sacrifice their futures in his house. Not while he had power to stop it. After several minutes, Sophie looked up, face blotchy and wet. My mom won't accept charity. It's not charity, Vincent said. It's restitution. There's a difference. Sophie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She's going to be so angry when she finds out what I've been doing. Then let her be angry at me. Vincent pulled out his phone. I'm calling her right now. You're going home tonight. My driver will take you. You're going to sleep in tomorrow, and when your mother's ready to talk, we'll fix this together. Sophie nodded slowly, too exhausted and overwhelmed to argue. As Vincent watched her untie her yellow apron for the last time, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Purpose. This was what money was for. Not silk sheets or tennis courts he never used. This. The phone call to Eleanor Brennan at 3:15 a.m. went straight to voicemail. Vincent left a brief message. Mrs. Brennan, this is Vincent Harlow. I need to speak with you urgently regarding your daughter. Please come to my study at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. He sent Sophie home in his car with strict instructions to his driver. Make sure she gets inside safely. Wait until the lights come on. Then he sat in his study and waited for morning. At 8:45 a.m., there was a soft knock on his study door. Come in, Vincent said. The door opened slowly. Eleanor Brennan stepped inside, and Vincent's chest tightened at the sight of her. She looked like a ghost. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, with a grayish tinge that spoke of serious illness. She'd lost weight. Her uniform hung loose on her frame. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but she stood straight, shoulders back, trying desperately to project strength she clearly didn't have. She'd come straight from a chemotherapy session. Vincent could see it in the slight tremor of her hands, the careful way she held herself, as if any sudden movement might shatter her. Mr. Harlow, she said, her voice steady despite everything. I received your message. I apologize for any inconvenience Sophie may have caused. It won't happen again. Sit down, Mrs. Brennan, Vincent said gently. I prefer to stand, sir. I prefer you sit. You look like you're about to fall over. Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she lowered herself into the chair across from his desk with careful, measured movements. Pride radiated from her even as her body betrayed its weakness. Vincent leaned back in his chair, studying her. How long have you been hiding your cancer from me? Eleanor's eyes widened slightly, surprise, then resignation. I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't lie to me. I've had enough lies in the past 24 hours. Vincent's voice was firm, but not unkind. Stage 3 breast cancer. Diagnosed 11 weeks ago. Aggressive chemotherapy at County General. I know everything, Mrs. Brennan. Eleanor's face flushed with anger. You had no right to investigate my personal medical information. That's a violation of my privacy. Your 15-year-old daughter was washing my dishes at 2:30 in the morning after working a 6-hour shift at a grocery store. Vincent's voice cut through her protest like steel. That gave me every right. Eleanor went silent, her hands clenching in her lap. She's been doing it for 7 weeks, Vincent continued. Working 2 jobs, getting 3 hours of sleep a night, failing out of school. All to cover your shifts here because you've been too sick to work and too proud to ask for help. She told you that? Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. She told me enough. I figured out the rest. Vincent paused. Your scholarship committee meets next Wednesday to vote on revoking Sophie's funding. Did you know that? Eleanor's face crumpled. No, she said. She promised me everything was fine. She said she could handle it. She can't handle it. She's drowning. And you're letting her. I didn't know. Eleanor's voice broke, tears streaming down her pale face. I didn't know she was working at Morrison's. I didn't know she was coming here at night. She told me she was studying at a friend's house. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Vincent softened his voice. I'm not here to blame you, Mrs. Brennan. I'm here to help. Eleanor wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, straightening her spine. I don't need help. I need my job, and I'll work harder to make sure Sophie never has to cover for me again. You're not listening, Vincent said. I'm offering you help. Real help. I don't accept charity, Mr. Harlow. Eleanor's voice was fierce now, that pride flashing in her eyes like fire. I've worked my entire life. I've never taken handouts. I won't start now. This isn't charity. Then what is it? Vincent took a breath. It's restitution. Eleanor frowned, confused. Your husband, Daniel Brennan. He died in a construction accident 5 years ago. Faulty scaffolding on a downtown high-rise project. Your family sued Castellano Construction and settled for $45,000. Vincent paused, letting the number hang in the air. Do you know who represented Castellano? Eleanor shook her head slowly. Harlow and Associates. My law firm. The firm I built, the firm I trained, the firm that buried you in paperwork and legal fees until you had no choice but to accept a settlement that was barely enough to cover your husband's funeral. Eleanor stared at him, her face pale. I sold that firm 10 years ago, but I built its culture. I taught those lawyers to win at all costs, to crush the opposition, to force desperate people into corners until they surrendered. Vincent's voice was heavy with guilt. What happened to your family? That's on me, Mrs. Brennan. Not directly, but the responsibility is mine, and I'm going to make it right. You can't bring my husband back, Eleanor said quietly. No, but I can make sure you don't lose your daughter too. Eleanor's hands trembled in her lap. What are you proposing? Vincent leaned forward. Your medical bills are now my responsibility. All of them. Full coverage for your treatment, medications, doctor's visits, everything. Your position here will include comprehensive health benefits that should have been offered years ago. Unlimited sick leave, full insurance coverage. That's charity, Eleanor said, but her voice was weaker now. It's not charity. It's what I should have provided from the beginning. It's what every employer should provide. Vincent's voice was firm. And Sophie quits Morrison's immediately. She goes back to school full-time. I'm restoring her scholarship and arranging tutoring to help her catch up on what she's missed. Eleanor was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I can't accept this. What kind of example does that set for Sophie? That we take handouts from wealthy people when things get hard. The example you're setting right now is that she should work herself to death to save you, Vincent said bluntly. Is that better? Eleanor flinched as if she'd been struck. Vincent softened his tone. You're teaching her that asking for help is weakness. That suffering in silence is noble. That sacrificing her entire future is somehow honorable. He paused. But what if you taught her something different? What if you taught her that sometimes the system fails people, and when it does, it's right to demand justice? What if you showed her that accepting what you're owed isn't charity, it's dignity? Eleanor covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Vincent gave her time. He sat quietly, waiting while she processed everything. Finally, Eleanor looked up, her face wet but her eyes clearer. I can't just accept money and do nothing. That's not who I am. I'm not asking you to do nothing, Vincent said. I have a proposal. A new position, Estate Family Services Coordinator. You'd manage employee benefits, coordinate with local families in need, connect them with resources. Same salary, but with full comprehensive health coverage. Eleanor blinked. You're offering me a promotion? I'm offering you a job that needs doing. In researching your situation, I discovered 3 other employees on my staff facing similar crises. Single parents with medical bills, children with special needs, elderly parents requiring care. People suffering in silence because they're too proud or too scared to ask for help. Vincent leaned forward. Help me fix that, Mrs. Brennan. Help me make sure no other family goes through what yours has. Eleanor stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. On one condition, she said, her voice steady now. What's that? Sophie never knows this started because of her. She thinks you did this because it was the right thing to do. Not because you felt guilty or because you pitted us. Vincent smiled slightly. Deal. Eleanor stood, still shaky but standing taller now. When do I start? After your treatment is finished and your doctor clears you for work. Until then, you're on paid medical leave. Eleanor extended her hand. Vincent shook it, feeling the tremor in her grip, the fragility, but also the strength beneath it. As she turned to leave, Vincent called out, Mrs. Brennan? She paused at the door. Your daughter is extraordinary. You should be very proud. Eleanor smiled through her tears. I am, Mr. Harlow. Every single day. 6 weeks later, Vincent stood at his study window, watching Sophie Brennan walk across the estate grounds. It was 4:30 p.m., a normal time for a student to arrive, not 2:30 in the morning. She wore her Riverside Prep uniform, backpack slung over one shoulder, but still looked exhausted. The transformation wasn't happening as quickly as Vincent had hoped. Eleanor had accepted the new position and was thriving. Her chemotherapy was progressing well, doctors optimistic about remission. Color was returning to her face, energy slowly rebuilding. But Sophie was struggling. Vincent had kept his promise. The scholarship restored. Private tutors arranged to help Sophie catch up. Morrison's contract paid out in full. On paper, everything was fixed. In reality, Sophie was drowning in a different way. There was a soft knock. "Mr. Harlow? You asked to see me." Sophie stood in the doorway, face carefully neutral. She'd been avoiding him for weeks. Shame, guilt, the complicated emotions of someone saved when they've been trying to save themselves. "Come in, Sophie. Sit down." She sat stiffly, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor. So different from the defiant girl he'd found in his kitchen. "How's school?" Vincent asked. "Fine. Automatic. Practiced." "Sophie." Vincent's voice was gentle but firm. "I didn't build my fortune accepting convenient lies. Remember?" Her jaw tightened. A flash of the old Sophie. Then it crumbled. "I'm failing," she whispered. "Not officially. The tutors are helping. I'm passing, but I can't focus. I sit in calculus and my mind goes blank. I had a panic attack during a quiz last week." Vincent leaned forward. "Have you talked to anyone about this?" "The tutors. A counselor. A therapist." Sophie's face flushed. "I don't need therapy. I just need to work harder." "You carried adult burdens for 7 weeks. You worked 2 jobs on 3 hours of sleep because you thought your mother would die if you stopped. That's trauma. And trauma doesn't disappear because circumstances change." Sophie looked up, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I should be grateful. You saved us. You saved my mom. And instead I'm sitting here failing and useless." "Stop." Vincent's voice was sharp. "You're not useless. You're a 15-year-old girl who sacrificed everything to save her mother. You're one of the bravest people I've ever met. But bravery has a cost, Sophie. And you're paying it now." The tears spilled over. Sophie covered her face. Vincent stood, pulling a business card from his pocket. He set it on the arm of her chair. "Dr. Sarah Chun. She specializes in adolescent trauma. I've already called her. She's expecting you tomorrow at 4 p.m. My driver will take you." Sophie stared at the card. "I can't afford. It's covered. As many sessions as you need." Vincent's voice softened. "You can't fight your way through this alone. And you don't have to." She picked up the card with trembling fingers. "What if I can't be what I was before? What if I'm just broken now?" "Then we'll help you build something new," Vincent said quietly. "You don't have to be the same Sophie who ranked 3rd in her class. You just have to be the Sophie who survives. And then, when you're ready, the Sophie who thrives." Sophie nodded, wiping her eyes. "Okay, one more thing. Your mother tells me you wanted to be a civil rights attorney. Is that still true?" Sophie's face clouded. "I don't know if I'm smart enough anymore." "You're smart enough. The question is, are you brave enough to face what you've been through and still choose to fight for others?" Silence. Then, quietly, "I'll try. That's all I'm asking." 3 months later, the change was visible. Sophie had been seeing Dr. Chun twice a week. The panic attacks had decreased. She'd learned coping mechanisms for the anxiety. She was sleeping, really sleeping, for the first time in months. Her grades were climbing. Not back to 3rd in class, but climbing. Her math teacher called Vincent. She's not the same student. But she's becoming something different. Something stronger. Eleanor's health had improved dramatically. The chemotherapy had shrunk the tumors, her oncologist discussing remission timelines. She'd thrown herself into her new role, identifying 12 families on Vincent's staff struggling silently with medical bills or family crises. Vincent had been forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. His empire had been built on the invisible labor of people who were suffering. People who smiled professionally while their lives collapsed in private. He'd overhauled the entire employee benefit structure. Comprehensive health coverage for all staff. Emergency family fund for medical crises. Paid family leave. Mental health support. The cost, $1.2 million annually. His response when his CFO protested, I spend more on landscaping. This is non-negotiable. Vincent had started having monthly dinners with Sophie. They'd meet in his private dining room. Nothing formal, just conversation. Books, current events, college plans. One evening, Sophie set down her fork and looked at him directly. Why did you really help us? And don't say restitution. I know about your sister. Vincent went still. Your mother told you. No, I researched you. Julia Harlow died at 16 from leukemia. Your father refused experimental treatment because it was too expensive. Sophie's voice was gentle but unflinching. You couldn't save her, so you saved me instead. Vincent was quiet. Then, yes, I'm not your sister. I know, and you're not trying to replace her by helping me. No, I'm trying to be the person I couldn't be when I was 22. I'm trying to use the power I have now to do what I couldn't do then. Sophie nodded. I get that, but I need you to understand something. I'm not your redemption project. I'm grateful for everything you've done. You saved my mom's life. You saved my future. But I'm not going to spend my life being the girl you rescued. I'm going to be the woman who fought back. Vincent felt something shift in his chest. Pride, relief, recognition. Good, he said quietly. That's exactly who you should be. Sophie smiled. A real smile, the first he'd seen in months. I've been thinking about my college essay. I want to write about what happened. The real story. The truth about being 15 and choosing between your education and your mother's life. That's a powerful essay. I'm scared to write it, because if I write it honestly, I'll have to face everything I've been trying not to feel. Then fall apart, Vincent said. That's where the truth lives. Sophie nodded. Okay, I'll try. 2 weeks later, she brought in the essay. Vincent read it alone in his study, and when he finished, he wept for the second time in 30 years. It was raw, devastating, honest about sacrifice and survival and the impossible choices poverty forces on children. It was angry and vulnerable and brilliant. At the bottom, Sophie had written, I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I'm telling it because there are thousands of Sophie Brennans out there right now, washing dishes at 2:30 in the morning, sacrificing their futures. And that has to change. Vincent picked up his phone and called Dr. Wells. Patricia, it's Vincent Harlow. I need to establish an emergency fund at Riverside Prep for students facing family crises, medical bills, housing instability, food insecurity, full support, tutoring, counseling, whatever they need. There was a pause. Then Dr. Wells's voice, thick with emotion. How much are we talking about? $5 million to start. Renewable annually. Mr. Harlow, that's extraordinary. No, Vincent said, looking at Sophie's essay on his desk. That's just paying attention. Spring, junior year college planning. Sophie Brennan sat at the mahogany table in Vincent Harlow's private library, surrounded by college brochures and application materials. It was late April of her junior year, and the reality of college was no longer a distant dream. It was approaching fast. Yale Law School's undergraduate program stared up at her from the top of the pile. Her first choice, her dream. But the personal statements section remained blank. Vincent entered carrying 2 mugs of coffee, setting one beside her. How's the essay coming? Sophie grimaced. It's not. Writer's block, more like writer's terror. She pushed the laptop away. I know what I need to write about. I just don't know if I'm brave enough to write it. Vincent sat down across from her, his expression patient. Show me what you have. Sophie turned the laptop toward him. The essay was clinical, distant, emotionally flat. It described her experience working to support her mother through cancer treatment, but it read like a police report, factual, detached, safe. Vincent read it twice, then looked up at her. This isn't your story, Sophie. Yes, it is. Everything in there is true. Truth and honesty aren't the same thing. Vincent's voice was gentle but firm. This is what happened, but it's not what you felt. It's not what it cost you. Sophie's jaw tightened. If I write what I really felt, I'll fall apart. Then fall apart, Vincent said, echoing words he'd told her before. That's where the truth lives. And that's where the story that will change someone's lives too. Sophie stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled the laptop back and deleted everything she'd written. Over the next 2 weeks, Sophie rewrote her essay. She didn't show it to anyone, not her mother, not her counselor, not even Dr. Chen. She wrote in her room late at night, tears streaming down her face as she forced herself to relive every moment of those 7 weeks. When she finally brought the finished essay to Vincent, her hands were shaking. Vincent read it in silence, and when he reached the end, Sophie saw something she'd never seen before, tears rolling down the billionaire's face. The essay was devastating, raw and honest about the terror of watching her mother waste away, about the shame of falling asleep at her desk at school, about the moment she'd looked in the mirror and realized she didn't recognize herself anymore, about the impossible choice between her future and her mother's life, and how it wasn't really a choice at all, but it was also about survival, about fighting back, about refusing to let poverty and illness steal both her mother and her dreams. The final paragraph read, "I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I'm telling it because there are thousands of Sophie Brennans out there right now, washing dishes at 2:30 in the morning, sacrificing their futures because the system has failed their families. I want to be a civil rights attorney not in spite of what happened to me, but because of it, because I've seen firsthand what injustice looks like when it wears a suit and calls itself just business. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life fighting it." Vincent set the laptop down carefully and looked at Sophie. "This is extraordinary. It's too much, isn't it?" Sophie's voice was small, uncertain, too angry, too personal. "It's perfect," Vincent said, "and it's going to change everything." But Sophie wasn't listening. She was studying his face. "Why did you really help us, Mr. Harlow? And don't say restitution. I know about your sister." Vincent went still. "Your mother told you." "No." Sophie pulled out her phone and showed him a newspaper article from 1995. "Julia Harlow, age 16, died from leukemia. Your father, Richard Harlow, refused experimental treatment citing cost and unproven efficacy. You were 22, fresh out of college, powerless to override his decision." Vincent's throat tightened. He'd never spoken about Julia to anyone except Eleanor. "How did you find that?" "I researched you, just like you researched my family." Sophie's voice was gentle but unflinching. "You couldn't save her, so you saved me instead." Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then, finally, "Yes, I'm not your sister. I know, and you're not trying to replace her by helping me." "No," Vincent said carefully. "I'm not trying to replace her. I'm trying to be the person I couldn't be when I was 22 and watching my sister die. I'm trying to use the power I have now to do what I couldn't do then, fight back." Sophie nodded slowly. "I get that, but I need you to understand something." She leaned forward, her eyes clear and direct. "I'm not your redemption project. I'm grateful for everything you've done. You saved my mom's life. You saved my scholarship. You saved my future. But I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being the girl Vincent Harlow rescued. I'm going to be the woman who fought back." Vincent felt something shift in his chest, pride, relief, recognition. This was what he'd been waiting for. Not gratitude, not dependence, but this fierce, independent strength. "Good," he said quietly. "That's exactly who you should be." Sophie smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Then we understand each other." "We do." That evening, Vincent sat alone in his study, thinking about Julia. About the sister he'd lost 30 years ago because money and power had been in the wrong hands. About how he'd spent 3 decades building an empire without ever asking who was paying the real cost. Eleanor knocked softly on his door. "You wanted to see me? Come in." Vincent gestured to the chair across from his desk. "How are you feeling?" "Good. The doctor says I'm in remission." Eleanor's face glowed with health and hope. "They're scaling back my treatment. I'm going to be okay." "I'm glad." Vincent paused. "You know, don't you, about why I really helped your family?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "I've known since the beginning. Sophie showed me the article about Julia. We both know you weren't just paying a debt to my late husband." "I couldn't save her," Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was 22 years old, and I watched my father let my sister die because he thought the treatment was too experimental, too expensive, too risky. I had no power, no money, no voice, and she died anyway." "You didn't fail your sister, Vincent. You were a kid, but I'm not a kid anymore. And I have more power and money than I know what to do with. And I've spent 30 years using it to make more money instead of actually doing something that matters. Vincent looked at Eleanor. You and Sophie didn't save me from my guilt. You showed me what I should have been doing all along. Eleanor reached across the desk and took his hand. Then maybe Julia's legacy isn't her death. Maybe it's what you're doing now in her name. What are you going to keep doing? Vincent squeezed her hand. Thank you. As Eleanor left, Vincent picked up his phone and called his lawyer. James, I need you to draft documents for a new foundation. The Julia Harlow Memorial Fund. $10 million endowment to start. Focus areas: medical assistance for families facing catastrophic illness, educational support for students in crisis, legal aid for families crushed by corporate litigation. That's a significant commitment, Vincent. It's not a commitment, Vincent said, looking at a framed photo of Julia he'd kept hidden in his desk for 30 years. It's a promise I should have made a long time ago. When he hung up, Vincent sat in silence, feeling lighter than he had in decades. 3 damaged people, himself, Eleanor, and Sophie, had found each other in the most unlikely way. And together, they were building something that would outlast all of them. Not redemption. Purpose. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in late March. Sophie Brennan stared at it for a full minute before opening it, her hands trembling. The Yale University seal gleamed in the sunlight, streaming through her bedroom window. Eleanor stood in the doorway, holding her breath. Sophie carefully opened the envelope and pulled out the letter. Her eyes scanned the first line, and then her knees buckled. She sank on her bed, the letter still clutched in her hand. Mom, she whispered. I got in. Eleanor rushed forward, pulling Sophie into a fierce embrace. Both of them were crying, deep, shuddering sobs of relief and joy and disbelief. You did it, baby, Eleanor whispered. You did it. We did it, Sophie corrected, pulling back to look at her mother. Eleanor's face was healthy now, glowing with life. The cancer was in remission, had been for 8 months. Her hair had grown back, thick and dark. She looked like herself again. We survived. That evening, Vincent Harlow received a phone call. Mr. Harlow? It's Sophie. I got into Yale. Vincent felt a surge of pride, so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. Congratulations, Sophie. I never doubted you would. I want you at my graduation, Sophie said. You and Mom. Front row. Will you come? I wouldn't miss it for the world. Graduation day, June. Riverside Preparatory Academy's graduation ceremony was held outdoors on the school's sprawling lawn. 300 graduating seniors sat in neat rows, wearing royal blue caps and gowns. Parents and families filled the white, folding chairs facing the stage. Vincent sat in the front row next to Eleanor. She wore a simple blue dress, and her hand rested in his. Not romantically, but as family. As people who'd been through battle together and survived. She's valedictorian, Eleanor said, her voice thick with pride. After everything, she fought her way back to number 1. Vincent squeezed her hand. She's extraordinary. The ceremony proceeded with the usual speeches and recognition. Then the headmaster, Dr. Patricia Wells, stepped to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce our valedictorian, Sophie Brennan. The crowd erupted in applause. Sophie walked to the podium, her honor cords gleaming gold and blue in the sunlight. She looked poised, confident, strong. But when she reached the microphone and looked out at the crowd, Vincent saw the vulnerability beneath the strength. The girl who'd washed dishes at 2:30 a.m. was still there, underneath everything she'd become. Sophie took a deep breath and began. 2 years ago, I stood in a kitchen at 2:30 in the morning, washing dishes and trying not to fall asleep. I was working 2 jobs, getting 3 hours of sleep a night, and watching my grades collapse. I thought I was saving my mother's life. What I didn't realize was that I was losing my own. The crowd went silent. This wasn't the typical valedictorian speech. I'm not supposed to tell you this story, Sophie continued, her voice steady but raw. I'm supposed to talk about perseverance and achievement and how hard work pays off. But the truth is messier than that. The truth is that I almost lost everything. My scholarship, my education, my future. Not because I wasn't working hard enough, but because the system had failed my family. Eleanor's hand tightened in Vincent's. He could feel her trembling. My mother was diagnosed with cancer. My father had died 5 years earlier in a workplace accident, leaving us with almost nothing. My mother's medical bills consumed every penny we had. So I did what thousands of kids across this country do every day. I sacrificed my education to save my family. And I was ashamed of it. Sophie's voice cracked, but she pushed forward. I was ashamed that I couldn't do both. I was ashamed that I was failing. I was ashamed that I needed help. But then someone saw me. Someone asked why. Someone decided that the system that had crushed my family was wrong, and that he had the power to change it. She looked directly at Vincent. Mr. Vincent Harlow didn't just help my family. He asked questions about why families like mine exist in the first place. Why children have to choose between their education and their parents' lives. Why poverty and illness are treated as personal failures instead of systemic problems. Vincent felt tears streaming down his face. He didn't try to hide them. I'm standing here today because someone with power chose to use it for something that mattered, Sophie said. I'm going to Yale Law School in the fall because someone saw a broken pattern and decided to fix it instead of ignore it. She paused, looking out at her classmates. But I'm not telling you this story so you'll think I'm special. I'm telling you this story because I'm not. There are thousands of Sophie Brennans out there right now, working night shifts, sacrificing their education, drowning in silence because they're too proud or too ashamed to ask for help. And that has to change. Her voice grew stronger, more fierce. We're about to graduate and go out into the world. Some of us will have power, money, influence, platforms. And when you have that power, I'm asking you to use it. Don't look away from the broken patterns. Don't accept the systems that crush people. Ask why, and then do something about it. Sophie's eyes found Vincent's again. I learned something over the past 2 years. Privilege isn't just about having resources. It's about using them to build ladders for the people climbing behind you. It's about recognizing that your success is built on systems, and those systems are only as good as the people they don't leave behind. She smiled, that fierce, beautiful smile Vincent had come to know. So my challenge to you, class of 2027, is this: be the person who sees. Be the person who asks why. Be the person who builds ladders. Because the world doesn't need more people who've made it to the top. The world needs people who reach back down and pull others up with them. The crowd erupted into a standing ovation. Vincent and Eleanor were on their feet, clapping until their hands hurt, tears streaming down both their faces. Sophie received her diploma to thunderous applause. As she walked across the stage, Vincent thought about the broken girl he'd found in his kitchen 2 years ago and the powerful woman she'd become. 3 months later, Sophie stood in the office of the Daniel Brennan Memorial Foundation, the organization Vincent had established in her father's name, with Eleanor as executive director. A young girl, maybe 14, sat across from her with her mother. The mother looked exhausted, defeated. The girl looked terrified. Sophie recognized that terror. She'd worn it herself not so long ago. Tell me what's happening, Sophie said gently. The mother explained. Eviction notice, medical debt from her husband's stroke, daughter's scholarship at risk because she'd been missing school to work. Sophie listened, took notes, and then smiled. You're going to be okay, she said with absolute certainty. We're going to help you. That's what this foundation does. We make sure no family has to choose between survival and a future. As she walked the family through the resources available, rent assistance, medical bill negotiation, emergency scholarships, counseling services, Sophie caught her mother watching from the doorway. Eleanor was smiling through tears. When the family left, Eleanor entered and hugged Sophie tight. You're doing it, Eleanor whispered. You're already changing the world. We're doing it, Sophie corrected. You, me, and Vincent. Together. That evening, the three of them stood together on the mansion steps. 3 people who'd been strangers 2 years ago, now bound by something deeper than blood. Vincent looked at Sophie, who was about to leave for Yale. He looked at Eleanor, healthy and strong and fierce in her purpose. And he thought about Julia, the sister he'd lost, but whose legacy would live on in the thousands of families they'd help. I spent 30 years looking for a way to pay a debt to the past, Vincent said quietly. I never realized the debt was meant to be paid to the future. Sophie squeezed his hand. Then let's keep paying it forward. And standing there in the golden evening light, the three of them made a silent promise. No more children would wash dishes in the dark. Not while they had the power to stop it. The future, Vincent understood now, wasn't something you built alone. It was something you fought for together.